I shall be brief because I'm conscious of time, so can I just as well thank everybody for attending tonight and to thank the massed rank support of the Eurosceptic movement, who are quiet Eurosceptics in the Labour movement, who are perhaps not as brave to come to a Eurosceptic meeting at this conference. Also, I think we should pay tribute to the MPs on the panel and to those also who aren't here tonight. There are around 10 Labour Leave MPs who have constantly voted against the European Union, constantly voted in line with the manifesto, and constantly stood up for the 5 million Labour Brexit voters in this country. They do a brilliant job in Parliament and they represent an enormous number of people out there in the country. And without them, we would have lost that vote. So we should pay tribute to them. Now, the second referendum campaign is nothing more than a P45 to every Labour MP in the Midlands and a rejection job offer letter to every Labour candidate standing in the Midlands. And why? Because it is orchestrated and run, as has been said, by those who do not want Jeremy to succeed as leader of our party. They know full well that in the Midlands, the North, Wales, the North East, a second referendum and a pledge to remain would decimate the Labour Party. We don't want that. We're the true Labour people in this hall tonight, and that's why we're opposing that referendum. And isn't it extraordinary? When you look at referendum history in this country, the Welsh and Scottish devolution referendums, accepted. When you look at the Northern Ireland Good Friday Agreement, accepted. When you look at the London devolution and North East devolution referendums, both accepted. The alternative vote referendum, outcome accepted. The Scottish independence referendum, on the whole, accepted. EU referendum? My golly, you're all thick and need to do it again. It is completely outrageous, and for the first time in our modern political history, segments of our political class, not secretly, but openly and in full view, are trying to overturn a democratic vote. In any other country in the world, if this was happening, they'd be hauled up before the UN, they'd be hauled up before the international organisations and the courts, because it is anti-democratic and it is wrong. But over here, it's because we're all too thick and we didn't know what we were voting for. As Kate has said, go outside of London, go outside of the metropolitan areas. Bolton used to be a staunch Labour seat, now got a Tory MP. Why? We no longer represent those working class voters, as Paul has said. Why? Because unfortunately we are run by interests, both, I have to say, on the momentum side and on the progress side, who are totally detached from the reality of the situation in working class communities.
Yeah, yeah.
And if we get back... If we get back to a true and proper patriotic Labour Party that stands up for the policies that have been articulated by Austin, that have got great people leading it like Graham and Kate, and experience from business and people from the communities they're meant to represent like Paul, we would march into Downing Street without a question, and we'd be there for a very, very long time. Now, we're told that the Brexit that is currently unfolding before us is a hard right Tory Brexit. There's no such thing as a hard right Tory Brexit. If Labour was in government, we would be leaving the single market because we pledged to end freedom of movement. The two, you cannot have one without the other. We would be leaving the political institutions, which we have accepted. We have said we would stop paying the membership fee to Brussels. That's a hard left Labour Eurosceptic Brexit. It's nonsense. It's the language used by those, as was pointed out by Graham, very cleverly to try and trick us into staying in, and it won't wash. Now, the Labour manifesto of 2017, which we all campaigned on, was one of the most successful manifestos in recent years. Fantastic policies that, as Austin and others have pointed out, might not have been able to be implemented had we stayed in the European Union. But what else was that manifesto? It was a Brexit manifesto. Clearly there in the European Union section, written by Sir Keir Starmer, our shadow Brexit secretary, highlighting that we're leaving the political institutions, we're leaving the European Union. And then Barry Gardner, our Shadow Secretary of State for Trade, highlighted that if we stay in a customs arrangement, we'd be reduced to a vassal state. And that is not something an incoming Labour government would want to commit our party and this country to. And the Tories in that referendum too offered the same. And between us, we got 80% of the vote. 80% of the electorate in 2017 voted for Brexit parties. The only party in that election that promised another referendum and a campaign to stay was the Lib Dems. And who are they? And where are they? Their history. They've even had to outsource their leadership to try and find someone to take over. Nobody wants it. There is no electoral mandate for a second referendum. And let's call it that, because that's what they're pushing for. It's not a people's vote, not a people's referendum. It's a second referendum to try and overturn the first one. Now, Labour has got a membership of 500,000. We're proud of our vast membership. We're told, according to the polls, that 80% of those members support a second referendum. That is a drop in the ocean in the size of the UK electorate. There are 40-something million voters out there. This is a referendum not for the many, but for the few, and for the losers. And we should totally reject it. And Kate is absolutely right. At this conference, instead of looking at what we can do once we are outside the European Union, in terms of state aid, in terms of protecting our industry, having a non-racist immigration policy that we currently have as members of the European Union, and also being confident in our own movement. We're told, oh, we've got to stay in because all of our rights come from Brussels. All of our protections come from Brussels. What is the point in the Labour and trade union movement if we are saying it's not us that won those rights and defends those rights, it's Brussels? If that's the case, why are we all here? What's the point in the Labour movement? It's utter nonsense. We should be focusing on those policies that can bring the nation together, not looking to divide again on those old arguments of the referendum campaign, not looking to cause disunity in our movement and in our country. The Labour Party's always been about bringing people together, uniting the country. Let's reject, throw out the window this second referendum nonsense, get on with proper policies and proper campaigns, and we'll win that next election hands down. Thank you.